guys have Minnesota sports flowing in their veins. Mackey and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
All right, boys, I tweeted last night after last night's finals game, Game 5 victory in which Andrew Wiggins realized his full potential in back-to-back. Andrew Wiggins is literally realizing his full potential as a player in the middle of the NBA Finals, in must-win finals games. And I tweeted after the game last night, I was genuinely thrilled for Andrew Wiggins. You know, obviously would have been nice to see him do more of this in a Timberwolves uniform, but super happy for Andrew Wiggins. Here are some of the responses I've received from Timberwolves fans who clearly still harbor resentment over Andrew Wiggins. This is just a sampling, by the way.
Oh boy.
Thrilled for a guy who the franchise threw money at and all we got was mediocrity? Wow. I guess you're a better man than I am because this performance infuriates me. Why does this make you happy? He just didn't give a bleep when he was with the Timberwolves despite making max money, and this shows it. You're thrilled for a guy who coasted through many seasons with the Wolves while just being paid max money? He's a glorified Harrison Barnes. I think the Warriors won a championship with Harrison Barnes, actually. So
I think they did, yeah.
He's a good role player.
Yep.
Why would real Timberwolves fans be happy? If anything, this just proves Andrew Wiggins had it in him the whole time, and he didn't give a bleep in Minnesota. So we've got, a chunk of Wolves fans resentful of why wouldn't he do this in Minnesota. There's some of that I harbor as well, but I'm genuinely happy for the way that he's performing. And you've got Andrew Wiggins just becoming the perfect piece for a potential Warriors championship here, just validating their side of the trade, right? Meanwhile, yesterday, The Ringer in their latest mock draft floated that the Timberwolves are, quote, shopping D'Angelo Russell. D'Lo responded on social media by saying, "Hey, world, I'm shopping." So he acknowledged that there's shopping of some kind going on behind the scenes. So I guess I'd like to throw all of this in a giant stew for you, and we can chew on this. So Wiggins realizing his peak potential in the middle of the NBA Finals, and D'Lo being shopped around after getting benched for the final 5 minutes of a decisive Game 6 in the first round.
So, first of all, I would like to say that there are many franchises, professional men's franchises in this town that have made awful blunders, that have been terribly run. The Wolves qualify on terribly run. But I think the easy conversation is, well, why couldn't this have happened here? Why couldn't Wiggy have achieved this success here? But I think that this is a really interesting discussion, and I think it's layered. David Ortiz was a screw-up of epic proportions and will forever scar a certain generation of sports fans in this town, okay? And I actually think the Ortiz one is pretty black and white. They screwed up. They gave away a player who, as Phil has said, I think since the day that we started this show, is basically Babe Ruth. At least the Red Sox got something, yeah. So,
Red Sox
I'm with you.
Some money, yeah.
And I'm with you. The Twins just screwed up. There is no but what about this? I think the Wiggins conversation to start there is far more in depth and far more intriguing. And I tweeted this last night. I firmly believe that what we are seeing, and there was no question this guy was talented. So, the talent's not I never saw talent. We saw talent. But I tweeted last night, and I wrote a column about this at the time, and I stand by it because it is a red flag of the first class. When Wiggins' rookie season, he was good. I don't think he was great, but he's young, and so you don't know at that point exactly what to expect. And then he goes in, and the Wolves go into Cleveland, which had, of course, traded him. And he has a massive game. He just cleans up. You're like, oh, wow. And he said after that game, this was a motivation game. And I wrote a column off the fact that, watch out, that's a very dangerous thing to say. Now, I do not expect 82 great games, right? But when you are literally going to cherry pick your moments, which is what he was doing, and that was sort of the start. He was cherry picking his moments of when to apply himself at his best. That is dangerous. And I don't think that this is tough as far as the finals go. The dude has talent, and when he's called upon and empowered, he is going to and has the ability to play well. So, like, nothing he's doing now is like, he never did that here. He actually did. He just didn't do it enough. He also was a foundational piece here. In Golden State, he is part of the pie, part of the puzzle, but he's not this consistent foundational piece. And the last thing is, if you want to be mad at the Timberwolves, and this is why it's good they're being sold. This is why it's good they're being sold. Because the culture of this franchise has dragged many a player down. Andrew Wiggins, motivationally, didn't have it here. Golden State's a different animal completely. I mean, it's a great culture. It's a great coach. It's a team that spends. So is this surprising? No. Do I think that this discussion goes well beyond the Ortiz discussion? Absolutely, I do.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack here, and we'll loop this back around with the D'Lo stuff that came out yesterday too, because it's all kind of intertwined, and we're putting one old girlfriend chapter to bed here, right? With Wiggins blowing up in the finals, and we're talking about the latest future ex-girlfriend in D'Angelo Russell. But you ask, why couldn't this have happened? A lot of Wolves fans. So, well, why couldn't this have happened here? Why? And Wiggins deserves a huge chunk of the blame for just sort of licking his finger and sticking it in the wind for when he wants to play that way. And I think in our text thread last night, you said, he used to do this against the Cavs. You would do it against other teams, national TV tonight against the Warriors or something, and he's going to prove himself. And he could do it on any given night. He could go drop 25 or 30 points. And if he wanted to go grab 8 or 9 rebounds, he could. Usually he would grab 2 because, he just kind of coasted. But the finals are the ultimate motivation, right? Everyone's watching. Yes. This is your career legacy. If you're going to be, it doesn't matter who your opponent is. You're just going to be motivated to play that way in the finals. If this would have happened in Minnesota, it would have required Andrew Wiggins to lead it. He would have had to have been the foundation. Exactly. And that was just too much of a burden for him to take on. And I think that's the resentment that Wolves fans feel is, well, why couldn't this have happened to me? Well, the only way it was going to happen is if he had a different personality and wanted to do that every single night and be the leader, the vocal leader, the front face of the face of the franchise, or whatever you want to call it. So part of it's on Wiggins himself, but at the same time, he walked into an organization that they had to beg Flip Saunders to come back and save the organization from years of David Kahn and Kurt Rambis and falling asleep on the bench Rick Adelman at the end of his career, right? And so he walks into this chaotic, just ridiculously, terribly run organization, and his peak potential wasn't maximized in part because of that. I don't even know if they've maximized Karl Anthony Towns' potential yet because of just some of the residual organizational chaos and crap that he was part of. It's like Karl Anthony Towns came out better than Andrew Wiggins, but he came out as kind of a 20% broken version of himself. What would his personality and confidence be like if he were drafted into the Spurs organization or the Warriors organization, right? And just more of a joyful, put together collection. So I guess I look at all of it and say, yeah, it does drive me nuts that Wiggins didn't want to do that more often as a Timberwolf, but that wasn't his personality as it turned out. They lit a bunch of money on fire hoping that he would turn into something that he wasn't. Yes. And at the end of the day, he just needed to go be the third or fourth thing on top of a foundation that already existed, a lot less pressure. The thing is, when he performs like that last night and in Game 4, we celebrate it. We bump his NBA Finals MVP odds up. They're up to 18-1 now, MGM Sportsbook. But if he didn't play that way, if he just had kind of a normal Andrew Wiggins game where he goes for 14 points on 4 of 11 shooting and grabs 5 rebounds, he's not going to get savaged in the newspapers or on TV. It would have just been like, oh, this is kind of who Andrew Wiggins has been. I mean, this is house money for him in terms of pressure. And he is over-delivering on top of expectations, as we talked about on yesterday's show. And I'm just sort of at peace with it, being a diehard Timberwolves guy. I am genuinely happy for him.
It was never going to happen here. Like Ortiz, you can say, well, if he had stayed here, he's going to be damn good, right? And they pulled the plug far too prematurely on Ortiz. So that's one where you look back and think, okay, that's a massive screw-up, and you missed out. if you think for 1 second that Wiggy was going to stay here and develop into the guy that we saw last night consistently, and by the way, he would have had games like that. But if you think this is him now and they screwed the pooch here, you are 1,000% wrong. Now, if you want to be mad at him for not ever fully achieving, and he's doing the same thing in Golden State to a certain degree, he's never going to achieve consistently what a first overall pick should achieve. But he is going to occasionally be great. And yeah, the stage, I mean, think about it. It was a motivational game. What is more, to your point, motivational than ABC, 2 teams left June? So this does not surprise me. And it also drives me absolutely crazy because every one of us first guessed this and thought this is one of the stupidest things. Every one of us said, when Glenn said, I want to look him in the eye and say, are you going to give? Because he was talking about what we saw last night, right? Like that was what Glenn was talking about. Am I going to get that effort every night? And we are like, there's no way you're going to. We've seen enough. And Glenn's like, he looked me in the eye and told me that.
And the Warriors, by the way, aren't getting that effort every single night either. I think they're getting a more heightened version of the effort on a regular basis. But it's kind of nice when you have a role player on your team that you can make work salary-wise because you're willing to spend the luxury tax. But you have a role player on your team that any given night can just be the best player when he wants to be. He can just go off for 25 points and 13 rebounds when he wants to. So the last 2 games, he has grabbed more rebounds than in any game ever with the Timberwolves. Back-to-back games, 16 rebounds, 13. His Wolves high was 11. So to loop the D'Lo thing back in here, this is the crazy thing. Wiggins has obviously been, I don't know if I would say a better piece for he's been a perfect piece for the Warriors. Let's just say that. He's been a perfect piece for the Warriors. Mm-hmm. I think D'Lo at times has been a perfect piece for the Timberwolves throughout a large chunk of last year. And I think D'Lo has a bigger impact on the Timberwolves winning this last year, finally getting to 46 wins in a playoff appearance, than Wiggins would have. If you were to run that whole thing back last year and you take D'Lo off the team, maybe you bring in like some other point guard or something, but you move D'Lo off the team, you put this version of Andrew Wiggins on the team. I don't think you're getting as good of a version of Wiggins on this year's Timberwolves as the Warriors are getting. So, maybe he's a more perfect fit, Wiggins, with the Warriors because ultimately they need his performances to win a championship over Boston in this series. But I don't think the Wolves go from being 25-30 wins to 46 wins without D'Lo. And now the next question is, as they're reportedly shopping him, according to The Ringer, and by the way, Mark Stein, who has his own platform now, his own newsletter, he put out a report like a month ago that said the Wolves are very much expected to unload the last year of D'Angelo Russell's contract at some point. So you got some heavy hitters here now sniffing around this over the last month, and maybe some of it's educated speculation. But to me, the biggest question is, if you're looking to go from 46 wins to, let's say, 56 wins, which might seem unattainable because I think it's only happened one time in franchise history, the 2003-04 KG MVP season, is D'Lo part of that ascension? Because to me, it's not good enough. Oh, the Wolves got to 46 wins. Right. Let's park it here, baby. Let's just keep running this back, get to the play-in. I mean, the next step, you don't double Tim Connolly's salary and pull him over from Denver to just preserve 46 wins. They're looking to get to 50, 55 plus, and get to that next level at the top of the Western Conference. Is D'Lo part of that ascension? That's the first variable they have to figure out over the next few weeks as they enter the chaotic offseason process.
I think the pretty simple answer to that question is no. I think when you bench a guy who is a starter, who is seen as a star, who is basically a max player, I think when you bench him for the end of a playoff game, that says a lot. And look, the one thing that I'm going to I think, a lot about Conley, and Finch has proven this already, they're not screwing around. Mm-hmm. Like, this is no longer Camp Wolves. Hey, I hope this works out. These guys are serious. Like, I do have, for the first time in a long time, Flip, I felt this too, but I feel like this team knows the direction and what it wants. And most importantly, I feel like, at least from a basketball standpoint, we're going to get stability, which I know is amazing. But I think when you bench D'Lo for the end of that playoff game, it spoke volumes. Because that is how can I put this? A vote of no confidence. Like, that is, you are hurting us so much you can't play. And it's a playoff game. And that's a huge statement. And I don't think Finch does that without thinking about what that means.
Yeah.
I don't think Finch goes Tibbs and gets pissed off and pulls him and then says, it's all fine.
Yeah, because you know that it's if you lose, it is the last thing that everyone's going to taste and remember going into an off season of uncertainty. So that's like, to your point, Finch made that decision, and he probably made it largely just in the moment. Hey, he has not played well in the series. I don't think he was actively thinking as much about, how is this going to land in 2 months from now when we have to figure out what to do with him. But that's part of it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to bench him, and if we don't win this game, he's going to go into the offseason thinking about how he didn't play in the last 5 or 6 minutes. And the organization is going to think about, boy, he wasn't able to stay on the court for the last 5 or 6 minutes because he wasn't good enough. He wasn't good enough. So, yeah, I don't on a 56-win team, if we can put ourselves in that alternate universe of the next step of Timberwolves basketball, I can see Anthony Edwards as one of your 2 best players. I almost think he has to be. He has to ascend, and the team has to sort of follow him. As much as Towns bugged the hell out of me in that playoff series, just disappearing and shipwrecking games 3 or 4 times, he's so talented. He's going to sign a Supermax extension. Mm-hmm. Yeah, could I see Karl Anthony Towns as like the second guy on a 50-plus win team? Absolutely. This is where you got to figure out, how does D'Lo fit in? He certainly doesn't fit in at $30 million a year, and I don't think his ego is going to allow some sort of a pay cut at this point. So I just don't know that there's a scenario where he remains a Timberwolf on a team that aspires to move into one of those top 3 or 4 seeds in the Western Conference.
And I think Tim Connelly probably, along with Finch, looks at D'Lo and says, I don't think so here. But that being said, let me make this clear. I don't think that the Wiggins trade, if you go back now and think, well, the Wolves should have gotten more, D'Lo might be traded. I don't think that was possible. I think Andrew Wiggins' reputation around this league meant that you were going to get what you got. So like Gerson didn't get ripped off. It's not like, how could you not get more now? I also think, to go back on that, and this is really where the Towns thing to me becomes an interesting intersection of the conversation with what's gone on in Golden State. Think about the stability that Wiggins has in Golden State, starting with the coach. I mean, Steve Kerr is incredible. He is incredible. Mm-hmm. And he has the ability not to say, look me in the eye and tell me you're going to play hard. He has the ability to get out of players, and this is what great coaches do, get out of players what he needs at the moment, right? So like Steve Kerr's not sweating. I just looked at the box score of the March 9th game, and Wiggy disappeared in that game. He's finding a way to motivate and get what he needs in the moment from the player. Now let's go to Towns, Phil, because you brought up a really interesting thing, and I think Finch can do it, but I'm curious. I've got a little bit of doubt now. But to your point, where you said, I don't know if the Wolves have maximized Towns yet, which is probably very true. My question becomes, okay, can they? Because if they don't, they're never going to get to where we ultimately want them to go. And then most importantly, if people say, well, give us an example where Towns was not maxed.
Oh,
it's simple. The playoffs. Like, well, I'll just look at the playoffs.
Yes, 100%. But let's even zoom further out. So Steph Curry has realized the best version of himself. You think of him out of Davidson, and the questions were, boy, he can shoot, but is he really going to be the guy that runs an offense? Is he going to be a liability on defense? He's so undersized and scrawny and small, and like all of the questions about him subsided after about 2 years, and he has become the greatest shooter and initiator of three-point offense in the history of the NBA, right? If I were to tell you, okay, Karl Anthony Towns, he's not coming from Davidson as an undersized guy who has some skills. He's coming from Kentucky. He's 7 feet tall. In fact, they withheld his biggest weapon at Kentucky. They didn't let him shoot threes at Kentucky. But he's the greatest 7-foot shooter in the history of the NBA, percentage-wise. And he can handle and dribble drive like a guard. He can initiate offense from the top of the key. He can do crossover dribbles and Euro steps, get into the lane, and score from anywhere he wants to. He can post up, he can fade away, and he can block some shots. Is he a Rudy Gobert level defender? No, but like when he applies himself, he can Definitely wreak havoc defensively. All of those things. And going into year 7 or whatever it is, he's not regarded as one of the 10 best players in the NBA. Some people might say he is. I don't even know if you did all right, take the top 100 NBA media members or the coaches or whatever. And this is not just a dump on Towns. This is more of an organizational commentary than a Towns commentary. I don't know that he'd be in the top 15 or 20 if you literally pulled people that watch the NBA, cover the NBA, national publications. He's certainly not a top 10 player in the league, according to those people. Should he probably be by this point, based on all the crazy skill sets that he has? Yes. Yeah. Now, is some of it on him for just not being able to stay out of foul trouble? Like, he leads the league in fouls and stuff, right? Like, some of it's on him. But when you are part of that many coaching changes and a death of Flip Saunders and front office chaos and Tom Thibodeau and Jimmy Butler, and they train wreck for a couple of years, and Glenn Taylor, right? How would you maximize? How would you be the guy like Steph Curry that just reaches the 99th percentile of his capabilities, right? It's probably not going to happen.
There is no, or I shouldn't say this now, there previously has been no infrastructure here at all. Now I will say this. There are players who definitely have the drive from within, right? To say, screw it. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to work hard. I am going to create the culture. I think it's very, very safe to say that Karl Anthony Towns is not one of those guys. And so Ant is. In fact, you know what I would love to know privately? I would love to know how Kat and Ant are processing what they're watching in these finals. Mm-hmm. Because my guess is this. It might be completely unfair. My guess is Ant is like, oh, hell yeah. Oh, yeah. I see something there. Let's bring it on. Let's start tomorrow. Kat, I feel like, would say, man, Wiggy's haven't. Look at what I should be doing.
I disagree.
That.
I think Kat wants it just as bad.
Okay.
I think.
I think he wants it. I just want to know what the process is of how they're processing what they're watching. I do think Kat wants it. That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It's hard to put yourself in a guy's brain and skull, but I think Anthony Edwards. Doogie told a story that Anthony Edwards went to a couple playoff games last year. I think didn't he go to like an Atlanta Hawks conference finals game or something, and he was walking around the arena just like kind of seething, I guess, as much as a guy who's that happy-go-lucky can be seething. You know, it's got to be tough when you're sitting there for 6 weeks and you're watching Andrew Wiggins and Nemanja Bjelica at least in Game 4 play key minutes of an NBA Finals game to start the fourth quarter, right? Bjelica is out there, and you're not, And
I want that to drive Kat. Like, I want Kat to watch that and think, I am more talented than any of those guys. Why are they there? And I know the answer, but I want that to drive him. I want that to drive this entire franchise as far as looking at your talent, what you've got, and to realize you're not them, but you have the opportunity to set a foundation that can be like them if you do it right.
A couple other things that the Wolves can maybe take notes on here, and then I have a couple other D-Lo questions for you guys, but let's talk about our friends at Aquaside here. Now that it's going to be 99-degree lake weather here, people are going to want to maybe contact Aquaside. Declan?
That's right, because you don't want to jump into a lake that has a bunch of lake weeds or algae. Ugh, you don't that feeling you get when you step on that lake weed. It's not the best feeling, right? Not a fan at all. You should call Aquaside if that's your problem. They're a local company. They're in White Bear Lake. They have Aquaside pellets. It's a do-it-yourself product, but they also walk you through how to use it. And their products are safe. They're registered with both the EPA and the DNR. Shipping is even free. You can go check them out at White Bear Lake, or just go to aquaside.com to learn more. Aquaside pellets. Go check them out. Aquaside.com to learn more.
Now, the Timberwolves may have had some performance issues in the fourth quarter of their playoff series against Memphis. If you're having performance issues, specifically ED, doesn't have to be an embarrassing conversation, guys. Valley Park Medical is here to help you. Valley Park Medical Clinic has a medical approach. You'll meet with a medical provider, but the treatments are surgery-free, drug-free, and non-invasive. It's a highly trained team that will meet with you in a discreet manner. Find out more information at valleyparkmedicalclinic.com. That's valleyparkmedicalclinic.com. One thing I was observing, and again, it's one series against Memphis, but I think you also saw it with Kat in the series against Houston a few years ago. What does it take to go deep in the playoffs? Well, you have to have good players, and you have to have a roster and cohesiveness and all these different things. But you also need players who actively rise up and elevate in the biggest games. And you're kind of seeing it with like Wiggins kind of does it. Wiggins, when he wants to, can elevate above his baseline performance and give you an extra level of energy and rebounding. And some of it's because he's holding it back during the regular season.
Right.
And the reality for the Timberwolves is their two highest paid players disappeared a lot in the biggest games. You know, they both had a couple big games here and there against Memphis, and D'Lo certainly against the Clippers in the second half in that play-in game. But, you know, Cat disappeared for 3 of the 7 playoff or play-in games, just absolutely took himself out of those games. And D'Lo shot 33% and was benched for the final 5 minutes of Game 6. And so what I'm looking for is, going forward, whether it's Cat or whatever they wind up doing with D'Lo, you need guys who are just comfortable in those moments with who they are as players, playing together, and they don't take dumb fadeaway shots from 18 feet with a hand in their face. You know, they're just like they can slow things down. They don't argue with officials incessantly. I love the fact that the Boston coaching staff was lighting into some of their players when they would complain at officials last night. You know, like Marcus Smart and some of these guys just incessantly. And at one point, the coach pulls, I think it was Smart. I can't remember what. Pulls him over and says, you could read his lips, stop complaining to the officials. Like, dude, lock it in. You know, I just stop letting the moment swallow you up in some of these situations. Now, how much of it is they just need to be in more situations like that to get more comfortable versus an actual flaw in the way that they're made up, where they shrink in these moments? You know, D'Lo shoots 33% in the playoffs for his career. Oh, what are you supposed to do with that?
So I think part of the thing here, too, is, and this translates to all sports, but I think what you're talking about as well, and Golden State's got this down, it's you have to look at the roster like a puzzle. And you need your pieces, your centerpieces, no question about it, Ant, Cat. But from there on out, you have to build a team not like a fantasy team where like, oh, we got this guy, and then we got that guy, and then you have to get the parts that fit. And to your point, Phil, that is a guy who might be good in March, but in May flips a switch. And then it's like, oh my God, this is what we need right now. And I think that that's part of the problem with a lot of people now trying to build teams, and Conley probably has this down. But I think they look at the roster construction as who can I get, not personality-wise, but like what does this guy bring skill set-wise, which is certainly important. But I think that there's also a puzzle-like aspect, because we have seen this before. Guys don't fit. Like the Twins went through this in 2018 and last year. They brought in pieces that clearly didn't fit. That's important. So I think as the Wolves build this thing out, it's not like, oh, they got that guy, he's going to be great. It's like, okay, but does he fit the puzzle? Because in basketball, I think it's not as hard, because once you get your foundational pieces, now it's not like you're trying to get 20 more guys, right? You're trying to get, so you're trying to construct what is actually a fairly small puzzle, but it's got to be the right people and right guys, and you don't need necessarily redundancies. And you don't need guys who are going to who might be great, but are going to shrink when the game gets down to the wire or tough, which is sort of what D'Lo did.
Okay, who on the current Timberwolves roster can you see in a year or two from now, conference finals? I don't even know how to put NBA finals in the same sentence as Timberwolves, so I'll just leave it at deep in the playoffs, conference finals. It's Game 5. It's Game 6. It's a back-and-forth, hard-nosed series. You know, you're playing a team like the Suns or whoever it may be.
Okay.
The Warriors, you know, if they're still relevant in a couple of years. Who are the players on the current Timberwolves roster that you can see elevating in that, like becoming the best version of themselves to get the Wolves deep in the playoffs? I mean, Anthony Edwards is the top of the list, right?
Yeah, Ant's on top. And yeah, I mean, Jaden McDaniels is probably that second guy. I mean, he had moments in that first series.
Are you laughing because he's Declan's guy, or why are you laughing, Judd?
Oh, no,
the audience
I agree.
doesn't know why you're laughing right now.
because he's Dex's guy, but that's the exact type of guy who I think fits the puzzle.
And he had those moments
Declan
against Memphis in round one. He had a couple good games where he was amazing, and he was an athletic freak that kind of got buried a little bit in Washington, and now has thrived into this nice defensive role, but starting to find his shot a little bit more. I mean, that's that guy. That's the Warriors getting Jordan Poole to become the most improved player in the NBA, and him getting valuable minutes in the playoffs. Like Jaden McDaniels is probably closer to being a Jordan Poole like that situation where you can get a guy that was a late first round pick that wasn't supposed to be necessarily a stud right away, but had a pedigree and was relied upon, and then showed up in big moments. I mean, that is their Jordan Poole.
Well, I disagree. I think he's their Andrew Wiggins. I think Jaden McDaniels is what Andrew Wiggins has been the last two nights for the Warriors in 2 years from now.
Well,
if you need him to grab you 12 rebounds, he'll do it. If he needs to get to the lane and score and get to the free throw line, he'll do it. Play defense, hand in face. Yeah.
And Jordan Poole is a little bit more of a sieve defensively, where J-Mac's bread and butter is on the other end of the court, and his offensive game is now catching up to his defensive prowess. But yes, it could still be Wiggins by all means.
So here to me is example A, and don't laugh about how this can potentially work. And I'm not saying that in 2 years this guy's going to be a key guy. He might not be here, but we saw it in the playoffs. All right, Jordan McLaughlin. If you look at what he came in and gave them, it was a very important piece of the puzzle. Like, that's the type of thing that I think as fans and in our job, we sort of dismiss it and like, oh man, he rose up and played well. But the reality is this: what he did shouldn't be scoffed at. What he did was he came in and gave you at that moment exactly what you needed. And that's the type of thing I'm talking about. That's why this is not a, rotisserie baseball. It's not a fantasy basketball or football team. It's an actual putting together the pieces of the players and the people to maximize the culture there.
Yeah, the more I think about the Jaden McDaniels, so Jordan Poole, the idea of finding a guy late in the first round and maximizing, yes, but Jordan Poole's a guard who's mostly just like a 3-point shooting sniper guy.
Yeah.
Jaden McDaniels is 5-6 inches taller, can guard almost anyone on the floor, and the more I think about it, he's what Andrew Wiggins has become if he can maximize his potential. But I agree that he's on that list. So to me, it's Jaden McDaniels. I mean, Towns, I think, but he needs to. You can't just go disappearing for 3 playoff games.
Yeah.
So I think he's a little bit in question. I think Jared Vanderbilt's on that list. Jordan McLaughlin, you mentioned him, probably on that list. And anyone else like Malik Beasley, D'Angelo Russell, Pat Bev is on the list, but he's 33, so I'm kind of leaving him off for contract and age purposes.
Right.
You got a huge chunk of money between those 3 guys are taking up $61 million or something like that on your salary cap. So what can you use that money for this summer and next summer to complement the pieces that we think are going to be part of that rise? That's the question.
Right. And I think on Towns, and this is tough, I think you have, because you're going to definitely sign him to the extension. I think you have to trust that it's going to work and that you can get the most from him, right? So like in 2 years, I don't see a conversation where the Timberwolves are going to be near the conference finals in 2 years if it doesn't involve Towns. Like, I think it has to involve Ant and Towns. I think if you're saying, well, Towns is not going to work, like he's going to get in the playoffs again next spring and melt down, I don't see a conversation of great progress. I'm not saying that you can't make progress, but I don't see oh my God, the Wolves have popped up, and now for the first time since 2004, they're in a Western Conference Finals.
If you can, I don't even know that I need more upside from Towns. I just need him to stop with the sabotage stuff. Just stop with some of the fouling and stop with some of the emotional outbursts and stuff. Just if he can just cut some of that stuff out, I don't even need him to replace that stuff with like stuff on the top end. Just cut the sabotage behavior out in this team.
That would be a nice start.
Situation. Yeah,
that'd be a hell of a start.
I know. I know we were planning on looping the Wild into this. What can they learn conversation? That might be worth a standalone on a different day here. This point.
Sounds good to me.
With Andrew Wiggins going off the way that he did. He's 18-1 for NBA Finals MVP. If he puts up another great game in Game 6, and Steph puts up another clunker where he doesn't make a 3 or something, and they still find a way to win, he might have to do it. They might have to have a Game 7. It might have to be 2 performances.
Steph wins. Now, Steph has previously never won a Finals MVP, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
And he's been the best player in the series, but he was really bad last night. Like 0 for 9 from 3.
Celtics were all over him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Wiggy, of course, stepped up.
Amazing.
Really
Amazing. Yeah, let us know. Let us know in the Score North YouTube comment section, which players on the current Timberwolves roster do you feel like you could see them being part of a deep playoff run in a year or 2 years from now? How many guys on the current roster are in that bin?